Thank you. Catherine, you may want to go to the slide with the leadership and committees of NAGE.
Right. I just wanted to highlight and let everyone know who is on the call about our leadership and about the committees. And that's also a pitch for those of you who are members, those of you who are not members to join, but those of you who are members to identify these are the committees we have, and we would welcome participation. Thank you. That's it. Go, Brian.
Thank you, Kathy. I'd like to start, if you could go to the next slide if you'd like, Catherine, thanks. I'm going to start with, just before I talk very specifically about the budget and appropriations, I want to speak to you briefly about the bigger picture in Washington. Suffice it to say, it's a very strange time to be working and living in Washington. Every day is, if you could remove yourself from some of the negative, it's almost like watching something that's surreal, a movie that's going on that challenges all of the things you've thought about government and the White House and everything for years. So yes, certainly I'm going to describe it as March Madness. And it's the kind of thing where there are so many issues, so many balls in the air right now in DC. We've got what you have obviously heard about, Obamacare, ACA, repeal and replacement. It looks like it died, at least for now, last Friday, but that's still a possibility. The House was talking about it again today, and the Senate, I think, would like it to just die so it doesn't have to come over there and die. But anyway, you've got the FY 2017 appropriations, which are running out in April, and I'll talk more about that. You've got the skinny budget, the full budget yet to be released. You've got work on tax reform, the Russian investigations, Senate confirmation hearings and votes on President Trump's nominees, including Supreme Court nominee Neil Gorsuch, and the possibility of potentially 2 budget reconciliation packages this calendar year, and I'll explain that. It's rare to see so much action, and it's also rare to see so much advocacy happening around it. Although so many important programs for older Americans, research, education, their services, and much more are under attack, it's been very inspiring to me. I've been here since 1983 to see all of the individuals and the organizations step up to work to protect these critical programs. So that is, I guess, the bright side, the positive side of all of this from my viewpoint. So let's dive in right now, and I should say from the outset that we're able to take questions. Catherine will field the questions and and repeat them to me, and we'll have a dialogue. So I'm going to start with some of these basic budget process issues, and we can do the questions as they occur to you if you'd like, instead of having to go back through. We can be flexible that way. So let's start with budgets and the budget reconciliation. Every year, the president submits a budget to Congress, usually in February. Many times it's considered dead on arrival. The budget, in theory, reflects the president's priorities, and using money to put emphasis on programs that he or she cares about. So the budget's delivered. The president this year, because it's a transitional year, it's the first year the president, Trump, has not been there and been working on a budget for more than a year, like Obama would have been if he had been staying in for another term. So that transition year, we have what they call a skinny budget, and the president has submitted that one. The budget is, whether it's ignored or whether certain parts of it are agreed on with the House and the Senate varies year to year, but the Senate and the House write their own budget. So they can take parts of the president's budget or they can ignore them. And they come up with bills and take them to the House and the Senate floor respectively. And in theory, if they each pass their own budgets, then they will have a conference committee and discuss the House budget, the Senate budget, the differences, and come up with a compromise of sorts. And then they each have to pass that compromise. Keep in mind, even if this system works completely the right way, and that happens, that bill, that budget is not sent to the president for signature. It's simply a blueprint that the House and the Senate use then the rest of the year. The rest of the year meaning a couple things. One, they take that budget that has been passed by the House and the Senate and they use it to determine how much money they will have the Appropriations Committee allocate. So the Appropriations Committee has 12 subcommittees. Each subcommittee gets an allocation, and those subcommittees go about determining the very specific amounts for each of the programs. In addition, the budget often reflects significant changes in entitlement programs, and so other committees of jurisdiction, the Energy and Commerce Committee, the Ways and Means Committee in the House, the Finance Committee in the Senate, are given instructions from that budget, and they are asked to come up with proposals that will reflect that budget, and those proposals are turned into what we call budget reconciliation. This year, the budget reconciliation package for fiscal year 2017, we're still in fiscal year 2017 until September 30th of 2017, that bill turned out to be the vehicle to repeal and replace Obamacare, or the ACA. That's the bill that I mentioned pretty much died before it went to the House floor for a vote last week. It was on the floor, there was debate, but they didn't have the vote, so they pulled the bill. That budget reconciliation package is used primarily to address financial issues. So you can't just put anything in that bill. And in the Senate, it has special rules. And you've heard about this. There's a rule that it's only on the floor for 24 hours, so senators can't filibuster the proposal. So that means basically 51 votes, a majority, can pass a budget reconciliation proposal in the Senate. And that's why the Republicans would have been able to make major changes in Medicaid and Medicare if they wanted, and Obamacare in the Senate, because we all know that it's in the Senate, it's now 52 Republicans and 48 Democrats and independents. There's actually 46 Democrats and 2 independents. So that's why the budget reconciliation process is so helpful to the majority when they want to make major changes to entitlement programs. So we don't think that is going to happen, although, as I've said, there's still the potential for them to revisit Obamacare at this point. So that's pretty much the budget process. And so there are 2 parts to it to remember: reconciliation and the appropriations piece. So let me turn now to fiscal year 2017 appropriations, the continuing resolution, or an omnibus package of all the remaining appropriation subcommittee bills that haven't been passed, versus a supplemental. A supplemental appropriations was requested just this week by the Trump administration. It includes $18 billion in cuts to many social programs, and it would increase military spending by about $30 billion. That supplemental bill is very similar to the president's budget proposal, which I'll speak about in a minute. As we look at the fiscal year 2017, let me just remind you, appropriations funding for government ends April 28th. They passed this bill last year to keep funding government. And if they don't fund government before the April 28th deadline, we'll have a government shutdown. You all remember what those are like. And there's a big blame game, and usually, well, it's, you know, the blame is spread around nicely each time, but usually Congress is blamed if there's a shutdown. Now, this time, the blame could easily be placed on the Democrats if they try to filibuster the appropriations process. So here's where we are. We understand from news reports and comments by members of the House and Senate over the last couple days that they are not interested in adding the president's supplemental appropriations request to the fiscal 2017 appropriations bill. It's very likely that they have almost reached agreement on a bill that will keep government going from April 28th to September 30th of this year. If it's a continuing resolution, it's very likely that it will continue funding at approximately FY 2016 funding levels. So most of our programs would remain the same. If they do an omnibus package where they pile together all the bills that the subcommittees have worked out, there is more likelihood that there could be variation in programs. For example, the State Health Insurance Counseling Assistance Program, what they call the SHIPs, they got more money in the House than they did the Senate in the work that was done in the committees. And so it's possible that you could see either the House or the Senate version, or you could see some compromise. They also will add, they usually add some disaster relief and some other bills or needs to either one, the continuing resolution or the omnibus budget bill. That should happen in the next couple weeks. Now, we're supposed to go on recess April 7th, and that should go in through the 24th. So there is some talk that there won't be a recess coming up. If enough members say it's going to look bad, we'll leave town right before the appropriations process, the appropriations bill runs out. They may reach agreement before they need to leave next week, and that will rectify that situation. Let me now go to the fiscal year 2018 President's budget. And you see on the screen skinny versus details. The skinny budget that came out a couple weeks ago is that short version of a budget. As I said, it was the shortest one any president's ever submitted to Congress. It was only 50-some pages. They varied over the years from 100 and some to 200 and some pages, basically. It was very very to the point. The president is interested in increasing defense by at least $54 billion, and he offsets the cuts in his or the increase that he wants for defense and homeland security by cuts in more than 18 agencies. I sent around a piece when it came out that talked about some of the cuts, but just let me briefly tell you the Health and Human Services programs are cut by 17.9% or $15.1 billion. This doesn't reflect the changes in mandatory spending, so the cuts could be even deeper than that. NIH would be cut by $5.8 billion, the programs called health professions and nursing training programs were cut by $403 million. And to quote the short document, it said, these programs which lack evidence that they have that they significantly improve the nation's healthcare workforce. They also eliminate a number of programs that you would be aware of. The employment program under the Older Americans Act called CSEP, LIHEAP, the Low Income Energy Assistance Program, Community Services Block Grant programs. They block grant the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. You can't tell exactly how much the cuts are, but it's a block granting. They eliminate Legal Services Corporation and many other programs for older persons and individuals with disabilities. So you can see that skinny budget tells us a great deal about what the president's larger detailed budget will be. The detailed budget is scheduled to come out in mid-May. The appropriations committees have already started their work on fiscal year 2018. So by mid-May, they may be well into completing the task. We're, of course, very hopeful that they're going to ignore most of the president's proposed cuts. But if you think about it, not only are the programs in HRSA that we're watching and we're funded through cut by $403 million, if you simply thought about an across-the-board cut of $19.7 million or any percentage in that range for other human service programs, you can imagine that programs that we all know support older persons in the community will be damaged significantly. Let's see. Let's go to the next slide, please. And let's talk just a little bit now about the past funding levels for Title 7 and 8 health professionals programs. You can see the two primary lines that we have concern for. The first one is about halfway down the page. It says geriatric. And this is literally the way the budget looks for HRSA. And you can see that under the second column from the right, FY 2017 Senate Committee, if you go straight down there, you see $38.737 million. That is what we have been receiving for the last number of years. The president proposed this. President Obama proposed this in fiscal year 16. That's what we would get most likely, or a slight reduction in fiscal year 2017 and potentially beyond if they keep doing continuing resolutions. I just want to point out that if you look down a little further under geriatric, about 7 lines or so down, there is something called comprehensive geriatric education. That is funding in the first column, it says FY 2015 final geriatric or comprehensive geriatric education, $4.5 million. That has now basically been combined with the funding we had been getting under Title VII, the $34.237 million. Those together are equaling the $38.73 million that we have now total. That happened in the appropriations process, and it reflects HRSA's creation of the GWEPs and the fact that they put monies primarily from Title VII, but also the $4.5 million from Title VIII together to fund the GWEPs. You could go to the next slide, please. So the next slide shows you that currently we've got the 38.7 rounded up in fiscal year 2016, and so far we have that amount in the continuing resolution for FY 2017. That's the bill, the continuing resolution that expires on April 28th. So that has to be taken care of sometime between now and then, hopefully, because we don't want a government shutdown, really for any reason. And then on the next bullet, you can see our request for fiscal year 2017 was in our testimony that we provided to the House and the Senate last year was at least $44.7 million for 2017. Those resources would have allowed for additional GWEPs being created. Now, this is what we ask for FY 2017 is pretty much moot at this point. It's very unlikely that what they do after April 28th will reflect a significant increase in very many programs, including ours. So it's much more likely that we will be, I would almost say this, that we will be fortunate if the 38.7 million is continued for FY 2017. It's possible that they'll put a few new programs in and do some sort of an across-the-board reduction in programs in the FY 2017 appropriations for the rest of the year. One of the outstanding issues there is the wall that President Trump has been talking about for well over a year, and he's requesting a couple $2 billion for planning for that wall. The Democrats don't want to do that. The Republicans are hesitant, but want to be responsive to the president. So there may be some additional funding that ends up cutting everything across the board slightly. The next bullet reflects, and just by the way, the Leadership Council of Aging Organizations and the Elder Care Workforce Alliance also supported our request of 44.7 for fiscal year 2017. For fiscal year 2018, NAGE is requesting $51 million. And that money would enable us to add 8 new GWEP centers and provide a geriatrics academic career award to each of the GWEP sites, the current sites and the additional ones. That's how we came up with that number. We've been working closely with the Elder Care Workforce Alliance to support that. And I'll mention in a bit, our authorization process also would support additional resources for both the GWEPs and the GACAs. Maybe I should stop and see if, Catherine, do you have any questions that have come in?
Yet, if anyone has, there aren't any questions as of now. If anyone has any questions, you can go ahead and type those in the chat box. But I think you can keep going.
Okay, good. So that's the appropriations process, and we spend a good bit of time and energy developing our testimony each year, sending letters in, both from the our own letters, the Leadership Council of Aging Organizations, the geriatric, well, I'll get into that a bit more when we get into advocacy. But anyway, a lot of our time is spent on this. However, we'll go to the next slide, and I'll speak briefly about the authorization process, which is important now because we are authorized under the Public Health Service Act, and there are 2 parts to that that particularly affect the GWEPs, and in the past, the geriatric education centers. The Title VIII reauthorization was started up last year and died, and that often happens. You may recall that the Older Americans Act went for several Congresses not reauthorized, and there were bills introduced, and eventually one became law last year. The Public Health Services Act Title VIII reauthorization has been introduced this year in the House only, HR 959, you can see it there. It's very easy to if you ever want to look up a bill, you just, basically you could Google HR 959 and it would probably pop up asking you if you wanted the 115th or 114th Congress, but we're in the 115th Congress, and you could see that bill. It's a very straightforward bill reauthorizing the nursing workforce programs. The one we're more involved in is the Public Health Service Act Title VII reauthorization. Now, it will be a separate bill, although it's always possible that Congress could merge bills and pass them together. And in fact, it's possible that those bills could be merged into another bigger bill and be passed together. But this legislation, there is a draft that we have shared with a number of possible sponsors. We've started with the House of Representatives. I'm working with the Elder Care Workforce Alliance, and we've divided up a list of potential sponsors, and we are discussing with them whether they would want to introduce this bill. Jan Schakowsky from the Chicago area is very interested in the bill. She's a Democrat, very progressive member. We're working right now to identify the right Republican to introduce that bill with her and others so that it's bipartisan. Obviously, our programs are bipartisan, and we are bipartisan as an organization, and work with both sides of the aisle, and happy to work with the White House as appropriate. So those discussions are underway. The primary difference between a straight reauthorization of the current law and what we're proposing up on the Hill, and of course members of Congress before they introduce the bill will have a lot to say about what it looks like, is that we would not only specifically reauthorize the GWEPs, which have never been mentioned in the authorization language before, but we would specifically identify the GWEPs, and we would reiterate that the Geriatrics Academic Career Awards, the GACAs, would be authorized as well. So it's clear that because the resources provided to GWEPs in most cases aren't adequate to include a GACA, that we want that a special line item, if you will, amount of money to be available for the GACAs. So that's where we are on the reauthorization process, and you'll hear in the next couple months from us when we have bills ready to be introduced in the House and the Senate. We'll be, once we have our two partners in the House, we will be working with them to identify the senators that they're comfortable having introduced the bills in the Senate. So let's see. Let's go to the next slide unless there's questions. So just let me reiterate a little bit about what NAGE does in terms of advocacy. First of all, I'm Brian Lindbergh in DC. You're seeing me from my office on K Street. And I spent 10 years on the House and Senate Aging Committees and have been working with NAGE for, I think it's at least 6 years or so. And we do various things around advocacy, but one of the main things we do is monitor what Congress is doing, and we try to influence them through our testimony on the House and Senate side on the Appropriations Committee, with our Hill visits. We've held Hill Days in the past where members come into Washington and set up meetings with their members of the House and the Senate. We've met with the Appropriations Committee each year. I meet with the Appropriations Committee as well as part of the Health Professions and Nursing Education Coalition, HIPNIC. You may be familiar with some of our letters that we send in. I should note that the HIPNIC letters on appropriations and our advocacy meetings involve larger HRSA health professionals and nursing education appropriations numbers. we do not, within that coalition, identify, for example, geriatrics and say this is how much money we're requesting in that area. Of course, I go to those meetings and I clearly identify our request, for example, $51 million this year. But again, it's a big coalition, and if you added all of the organizations' wish lists together, it would be more than the organization asked for in total, yet their request would certainly accommodate our $51 million, or for last year, the $44 million we requested. The Elder Care Workforce Alliance, which we're also a member of, and we have a couple of our members, a couple of you participate in those calls and meetings, as do I. Their request is exactly the same as our request, the $51 million. And we do joint Hill meetings together. As I mentioned, we're working together on the authorizations. The Leadership Council of Aging Organizations is, the NAGE is not a member of the LCAO, but I go to those meetings representing the Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program and sometimes the Gerontological Society of America. So I'm in a position to advocate for our funding requests there as well, and they have been very good over the years about including our requests in their requests up to the Hill. So this is all to say that it's not just NAGE here doing this, although we're the only organization fighting specifically for the GWEP funding alone. It's other groups, but when they're asking for funding, they're asking for multiple program funding levels, and so we're the ones trying to, educate them about our important programs and doing the advocacy for the GWEPs directly. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we'd like to do now in the future, and let me just jump to that, and then I'll have Ed and Maura, if they're on the line, chime in. What we're doing, as I mentioned, with those three organizations is trying to be consistent with our appropriations request again this year. And I mentioned that although the HIPNIC letters don't say the $51 million, they do include geriatrics, and they would accommodate our funding request. We have submitted testimony, which I hope all of you have seen, to the House of Representatives. We'll be submitting our testimony to the United States Senate Appropriations Committee, Subcommittee on Labor, HHS, Education, and Related Agencies in the next week or two. That isn't due until June, but we'll get it in well ahead of time, because we believe that they're starting, once they can finish this FY 2017 continuing resolution, they're going to move very quickly to figure out how much funding they're going to give programs for FY 2018. So in the next week or so, you will receive a packet likely from Kathy or me, and this would be going to NAGE members, and the packet will include information on our upcoming advocacy push. It'll include a time frame, which, as I mentioned earlier, it looks like if all things go the way we'd like to, Congress will be in recess from April 7th to the 24th, and that's the best time, we believe, for you to try to meet with your members of Congress, have them do a site visit if possible, so that you can explain what the GWEP does and the value of it to the community and to older adults who are receiving health care and supportive services, and of course to caregivers, given our role in helping to train caregivers as well. So it'll have a timetable, and it will give you information on how to contact your members of Congress. I've done a chart that shows all of the GWEPs and their members of the House and the Senate. It shows you which members which of your senators or member of the House of Representatives is on the Appropriations Committee, on the Subcommittee of Jurisdiction. It also will show you which ones will be involved in the reauthorization. We're not asking you to do advocacy on that now, but that information is there as well. It'll include an overview of the GWEP program. You'll get a copy of the NAGE testimony, which we'd like you to share with your members of Congress and the staff that you meet with. You may not be able to meet with the member. That's fine. Staff can play a very critical role in influencing what the member would like. And it'll have specific talking points about what we're asking your members of Congress to do. And that is basically support our funding request for FY 2018 and obviously oppose any proposals in either the president's budget or his request for supplemental appropriations that would cut HRSA funds and then cut us as well. And I should mention, you may be hearing as well from the GWEP Resource Center, which is run by the American Geriatrics Association. They are working with the Elder Care Workforce Alliance as well. And so you may get a message from them to weigh in with having your members visit your GWEP or communicating with them about our request. And that's fine. The more the merrier. But we want to make sure that you hear from us because we're the one group here in DC specifically only working on behalf of the GWEP, the GWEPs and the funding for you this coming year. So that is what I have so far, and I'm happy to open it up to Ed and or Maura for comments, additions, and then we can do question and answer.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Ed and Maura, you moved.
Can you hear me?
I can hear Ed.
Hey, hi. Hello, everyone. Really pleased to have this presentation today. And myself and several others on this call have been members of NAGE since its inception. And we can all describe firsthand how we've been able to work with HRSA and really influence Congress with the help of Brian. The association was actually formed at the suggestion of HRSA. And Bernice Parlak, who some of you may remember, was the HRSA director of the GECs. And she suggested that we form a national organization similar to the National AHEC organization, that we should be a united voice for input to HRSA and policymakers and really allow us to work together and share information. And those who were members a while ago realize how grateful we could be to call another NAGE member or NAGIC member and say, how do you do this? And we would get a real simple answer and move ahead. So we have done Hill visits, as Brian mentioned. We've actually written several white papers to HRSA after we've done surveys of the members, and they have been very effective. We also realized that with so many new GWEPs who are really unfamiliar with what we've been able to do, that it would be important to do everything we could to encourage everyone to become members. And one of the things that the board did was lower the dues to encourage you to become a member, and that thanks to Jan Busby and the Hartford Coordinating Center, you can use money from them to pay the NAGIC dues. As many of you know, our aging center here in Miami, the NAGIC, wasn't funded as a GWEP, but I really believe so strongly in NAGE and its importance that I've continued to work with NAGE and the board, and I really would encourage you to become members. You've seen and heard what we can do to influence Congress, and it's really, really important that we can present a united voice and hear from all of you. So thanks.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you so much. All All right. And was Maura going to add anything, Ed? Doesn't sound like it.
Not that I know of.
Okay, great.
So, Ed, maybe you can help me with, but I'll give it a try. Just one thing that may occur to you when I mean this is complicated stuff. I understand, and I apologize if I didn't make it clear enough. But you got 2 fiscal years going on, and then unfortunately you also have your funding cycle. So let me say one of the reasons we took the opportunity this year to propose the $51 million for 8 additional GWEPs and GACA's resources for GACAs for all of the GWEPs was that there will be the beginning of a new funding cycle within the FY 2018 fiscal year, which begins October 1 of 2017. That's the beginning of FY 2018. So as you wind up or wrap up this first funding cycle for the GWEPs, and we'll be applying again to be GWEPs and such, we are hopeful, and it's a very difficult time budget-wise. Everybody must know that. I don't mean to be, I don't want to be too optimistic, although this is my view on optimism. Every single year that I have worked in Congress and with Congress, some program gets additional funding from what they had the year before. And so I never give up trying to be that program. And I've had some success over the years. And a couple of years ago, actually, President Obama proposed additional money for the GECs at the time, geriatric education centers, and the House passed that additional money. And the darn Senate that year did not increase the funding. So we have come really close. So we continue to want to be one of those programs that is recognized as having great value in our communities and to older people and to health professions. So anyway, we keep fighting in that way. But the cycle that you run on is not the Congress's, the federal government's fiscal years. So just keep in mind that we right now are being funded on fiscal 2017 dollars, which will go through September 30th. And we are hopeful that in the next fiscal year, which will include the next funding cycle for GWEPs, to get additional monies. So there's some odd overlap with the fiscal year and the funding cycle. Did I do that right, Ed?
Hopefully. I'm sure people are still confused. What I'll try and do is make out a little chart that we can send around. That was the only way I was able to understand it.
Okay, thank you. And then if we don't have other questions, I just did want to thank Ed, because he has been the either chair or co-chair of the Legislative Affairs Committee for many, many years. And again, as he mentioned, he isn't running a GWEP, but is still committed to NAGE and the GWEPs and Centers on Aging and our other NAGE members who may be geriatric education centers. So I want to thank him, and I also want to say that it's actually a real honor and pleasure to be able to go up to the Hill and advocate for a program that I believe is extremely valuable. One reflection of that may be that I just did a column. I want to just draw it to your attention. Catherine mentioned it as people were signing on today. I do a monthly column in the Gerontological Society of America's monthly newsletter. And this month, I did that on the GWEPs. There's a little bit of history there Anyway, I hope you have a chance to take a look at that. And if you like it, you know, that's one of the tools you could use. I'm going to send out a copy with the other materials. I got it from GSA yesterday. A copy that you can electronically, that if you want to, you could print out and share with your members of the House and Senate and their staff when you do your meetings.
Right.
And that's all I have, Catherine. I don't know if Kathy has any other closing comments or not.
Yeah, well, we actually had a question that came up, and this is from Chris Clark in North Carolina. Brian, can you explain why the budget that the president proposed thinks that WEPs are not making a difference in the workforce?
Well, so there may be a lot of reasons. It's really hard to tell in the description that they provided, but let me say a couple things. One is that if you read the quote exactly, what they said was evidence that there was that we were making a significant difference in. It's on one of the slides, Kathy. Maybe we could. Pretty sure it's on one of the slides. But anyway, it was the kind of thing that it was almost a non-proof. We could not prove the statement wrong. We can prove how many healthcare professionals and caregivers and others we train who are on a daily basis serving older Americans, and because of the knowledge they have, are making a significant difference in their lives. So that's the first part. I think what they argued was absurd. We may see more in the final budget document about why they don't believe the evidence is there. But and I think frankly they were going through department after department trying to find programs that they could cut to save resources. Obviously, they're proposing $403 million in cuts at HRSA, and we're just $38 million of that. So they think none of those programs work. But anyway, they were looking for cuts because they want to balance, they want to pay for their $54 billion in defense spending increases and Homeland Security increases. Now, frankly, Democrats and Republicans have been talking about spending more on defense. Obama was proposing that as well. So it's possible that can happen. It doesn't have to happen at the expense of all of HRSA's programs, basically, and a lot of other things that they've proposed to eliminate. But what it says to me, having been here a few years, is we need to continue to make the case for the value of what we do. No one should let up. We usually have a handful of members of the House and the Senate that send dear colleagues around saying, these are important programs, please include them in the appropriations again. But we need to get more and more members of Congress believing in what we do, understanding that if we don't do it now, when would we do it? With the aging of the boomers and the need for healthcare professionals to treat them, when would we act if not now? So, but we also need to I think, communicate with them the value of our programs within our institutions, within our local communities, and show to the extent we can that we're making a difference for older people. And that not only does it improve the quality of life for older adults, but because of the training and the education and the work that we do, Medicare and Medicaid dollars are saved because there's appropriately trained healthcare professionals out there who otherwise would not understand treating people with multiple chronic illnesses, the value of connection with community-based supports and services. So anyway, I'm preaching to the choir, but I think we've got to make that case to challenge a simple sentence that they put in there frankly, that's what I believe is all they've thought about is, well, what could we say? Oh, there's not enough evidence that this is of value.
Chris, I'd like to add to that is, I don't know what they're collecting on the GWEPs now, but I know when HRSA was collecting GEC data, it really didn't show what impact we were having. Again, it showed how many people were educated, not the impact. And that's why it's so important that each of you meet with your congressmen and senators to let them know, give them personal stories so they can identify with what you're doing and get a connection. But as it stands now, they look at what HRSA has, and that doesn't show that we're being very effective in changing healthcare for the elderly.
Kathy, would you like to add anything in conclusion?
Catherine, do we have any more questions? Because we only have about another 2 minutes, so we need to.
Yeah, this is a comment and a question from Connie Kugel. They said we can't show that the workforce is improved, but are we showing improvements in quality of care?
I think that goes back to Ed's question. We have to, if we have that evidence, we should be sharing it with each other, but certainly bringing that back. I know that Elise Perlweiler is also on the phone, and Elise is a longstanding member of NAGE, and she is also in charge. She's the person on the elder care workforce who's working closely with Brian and has been an advocate. Elise, do you want to say anything?
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Brian, I thought you did a great job in giving an overview. It's always confusing when we have continuing resolutions and crossover of fiscal years and grant years and everything else. I think this is really a pivotal time, for us to make our voices heard. I know, I've worked with Ed and many members of the pre-existing GEC network when we did advocacy many years ago, when geriatrics was removed from the federal budget and we were able to get it reinstated. And I couldn't agree more that you have to have stories to bring with you and you have to have examples. And I think one of the benefits of the GWEP is the fact that we were actually asked to collect information on outcomes. Many times we're responsible for getting, outcomes data from our partners and our collaborators with regard to the GWEP, but I think we can speak to things about improving care, fostering collaborative practice, really helping with systems redesign and some of the things we've been doing, with practices to improve care of the elderly and trim lengths of stay and reduce hospital readmissions. So if you have data like that, it is really important to share some of that data in a bullet point leave behind message that you can use for your congressman, when you go to the Hill to make a visit. So, that's important to share with your legislators. And I think also, I don't know, Ed, whether or not you and Maura are planning on developing a generic NAGE leave behind sheet that might collect and aggregate some of that outcomes data, as a general NAGE leave behind for a packet that people could leave when they go to Hill visits. And
yeah,
I think,
we definitely are. We're working with Brian on that.
Yeah, that'll be great. And I think that's about all I have to say. But Brian, thank you very much for this presentation. I think it's important that we pay critical attention to what's going on right now. I think we really have to make our voices heard. Thank you.
Well,
Elise, thank you very much too. And Brian, I should have started with thanking you for this because this is great. But Brian, did you want to say one more thing? Because
well, I just was going to thank Elise too, because I didn't realize she was on the phone, or I would have mentioned, but she's a longtime advocate, great help in all of our work. Thank you.
Right, and we have a lot of other members who are wonderful leaders and advocates, former presidents of NAGE, who are on the call, and I don't want to start naming them because I'll be in trouble. I won't name all of them, but I want to thank everyone on this call. I want to urge those who are not members of NAGE to join. Ed gave us a wonderful shout out. Jan Busby Whitehead has figured out a way to have the money that we get from the Hartford Foundation. You may use some of that $2,000 for NAGE membership. Mindy Fain is going to follow up, who's our membership chair with Robin Golden, to make sure that you learn about our membership opportunities. That page I showed you has most of our members and those co-chairs on those leaders. The two people I did not have on that list who are also members of our board are Dr. Cucharas from the University of San Francisco and Angela Rothwell from University of Alabama, another former GEC organization. I want to thank everyone for joining us, and I want to especially thank Catherine for her wonderful willingness and Ted for their wonderful willingness to help us, to support this, and to acknowledge all of the work that all of us are doing. And please, please work both together and with our HRSA work and with the coordinating center. We do need to make ourselves heard. With that, we want to thank you all, and we will have additional, GWEP members will have additional follow-up, NAGE members will have additional follow-up and advocacy materials sent to them. Thank you all. You're wonderful, Catherine. And thank you, Ted. Ed, you were terrific.
No problem.
Thank you, Kathy. Thanks, Ed. We'll talk to you later.
I think this went pretty well.
Yeah, pretty smooth for.
Yeah, and we had 37 people over time, and
this is Rosella, and I'm still on the line. When is our next NAGE board meeting?
I think we have a meeting. Is it May 11th? Is that the date?
It might be the 13th. It should be the.
Oh, it's the 13th.